First of all, we'll cover some tradition that the Māori had that affect our family before we get into the history. Okay? So over the last month or so, Liz and I have been researching as much as we can or could the background to Te Rāwhiti, Matarawa and Ngāpuhi generally. We've also met with some of the kaumātua and we visited some of the marae. One of the most important people that we spoke to was Taoko Wihungi. So Taoko Wihungi had some of the original whakapapa books which have been kept secret for a long time. He told us that our relation Maihofa, who wrote the scroll, he told us, yeah, good, so we'll show everybody that, but she got most of that information from the books that the Wihungi family are in charge of in Mangakahia. Okay, so let's start off with tradition or systems that were in place within Ngāpuhi that affect our family significantly today. First of all, we found that before the arrival of the Pākehā, the Ngāpuhi people weren't as prominent as they are today. There was a mix of different hapu, including at Matarawa, and out here there was one Ngāre Raumate people who had lived here for over 300 years. But they had certain traditions that they kept alive, and the one that affects us the most is that they had people of high birth. And those people of high birth had a direct line whakapapa to Rahiri, the originator of the Ngāpuhi people. So that direct line was also propagated by the chiefs or the people of high birth, because what they did was they offered their daughters to be married into other families to ensure that the high birth line was kept alive and that the peace was kept between the hapu of these families. So that was always there. It was very important because that affects us here today, what they did, because that's what we found when we did our research. So there were some very important people who had this tradition to make sure that the bloodline was kept alive. So let's now fast forward to Matarawa. Matarawa was inhabited by another tribe before the Pākehā arrived. They were pushed out by the descendants of the Ngai Tāwake people. Okay? Now the Ngai Tāwake people are our people, and they are the biggest of the hapu of Ngāpuhi today. When you trace everybody's whakapapa, if they don't have Ngai Tāwake in there, there's something wrong. They belong somewhere else. So that's one important thing that we found, was this Ngai Tāwake grouping. They were the people of the forest, they were hunters, and they were fighters. And they grew an army of young men very quickly. And because of that, they also made a strategic relationship to the people of the Hokianga. So if you have a look at New Zealand, have a look at the north, look at where Matarawa and Kaikohe is, then look at where the Hokianga is, you will see that these people lived in the bush, not in the coast here. But because they lived in the bush, they were able to raise quite significant strength in terms of their young men. The alliance between the Matarawa people and the Hokianga is the part that affects us as a family more than anything else. And we'll come back to that when we go to the straight line. So what we're going to do, what we had to do was we had to eliminate as much of the branches as we could to get the Witehira and Ahitapu lines as straight as possible, so all of you people here, all of you descendants of these two lines, will recognise why you can live here in Te Rāwhiti and what your connection is to Matarawa and what your connection is to Kerikeri and Waimate North, okay? And then of course you've all heard that there's also some land up at Taupo Bay, up in the far eastern part of the North Island. So you'll find out why when we go over this whakapapa. Now let's go forward to Captain Cook. Captain Cook is the first significant Pākehā to arrive in the Bay of Islands, and that was 1769. 1769 is a very significant date because that was the end of the American Revolution, where the British were kicked out. But here is Captain Cook. He had an interpreter on board, Tupaia, who was from Tahiti. Tupaia was actually from the northern group of the Tahitian, known as Bora Bora. Now Bora Bora and Manahiki in the Cook Islands speak Ngāpuhi language. So when Cook dropped anchor here, he had already dropped anchor in other parts on the way here, but when he dropped anchor close by Te Rāwhiti, Tupaia, the interpreter on board, could hear the Māori talking in the canoes that had circled the boat. And he told Captain Cook, they speak my language. And because of that, Captain Cook safely dropped anchor and safely interacted, whereas in other parts where he stopped, like in the Hawke's Bay, it was too dangerous. Okay? But here, because Tupaia could speak the language of the Ngāpuhi, it was easy for them to interact. Now, there is a little island out here called Porapora. That's because of Bora Bora. The difference in the spelling is because the French missionaries in Tahiti heard it as a B. The Anglican church missionaries here heard it as a P. But that is our relationship to Tahiti. So that's the first thing you fellas have to think about. Your relationship to Tahiti is clearly marked by this rock out here called Bora Bora, or Pora Pora, okay? You also have to know that in the Cook Islands, in the northern part of the Cook Islands, they speak with an F sound, Manahiki, and they have a H sound. But as you go further south to the southern part of the Cook Islands, like Mangaia, they speak the Taranaki Māori. They sing their language. So I noticed that when I was up there, that there was a distinct difference. The ones that are closer to Tahiti, the northern part of Tahiti, they speak the Ngāpuhi dialect. Another thing you need to know is that the word Māori was not being used to describe our people here. We were called, once Cook came, we were called New Zealanders. The word Māori is a Cook Islands word. It is also a Tahitian word. They say Mauhi in Tahiti. In the Cook Islands, Māori means native or original. But the missionaries and the English always called us New Zealanders until a later date, so we'll come to that. So here we now have the first contact with the Pākehā. Captain Cook went on to Australia, and here is another interesting point that you need to know, and I'll show you a book. After interacting with the Māori, he was really impressed, and he wrote and they drew pictures of our people, mainly here in the Bay of Islands. And remember, Ipiripiri is the actual name of this place, this Bay of Islands, but Cook called it the Bay of Islands, so that's where that name comes from. Okay? there was a distinct difference that he noted between the Maori people and the Aborigine people when he anchored off the coast of Eastern Australia. He came across a beach south of Sydney, what is now Sydney today. It was a sandy beach, and he noticed there was a campfire burning and that there were people, black people, Aborigines, they were very dark, they were on the beach doing something. So he got off and they rowed ashore, and when they got to the shore, unlike the Maori, these people ran away. So here's our people again, the distinction between the Aborigine and the Maori. The Maori circled his boat and they spoke to him. In Australia, the Aborigines, they ran into the bush, but they had some shelters on the beach, and when Cook got onto the beach, they looked into the shelters and there were babies and little kids in there. So he then noted in his report back to England that the Aborigine, unlike the Maori, abandoned their children to danger. The Maori would never do that. So those are some interesting things. The next thing that happened was the British government, because of the American Revolution, they were now looking for another place to put convicts. So they consulted with Captain Cook, this Captain Cook guy, about New Zealand. And Captain Cook is recorded as telling them that you cannot use New Zealand as a place for convicts because the Maori people will kill them. The Maori people were more well organised. Hence the reason that Tasmania was made the first prison colony, because they knew that they could overcome the Aborigines. And then eventually, in one of the books that you all need to, I know it's a big one, what you need to read is this book here. If you ever get a chance, read this book here, because here he tells the story about what happened in Australia as opposed to what happened in New Zealand. He does reference New Zealand because Samuel Marsden's in this book, and he tells the story about how the Aborigines were killed off by the British, because unlike the Maori, the Aborigines were not fighters. So they passed a law in Australia putting a bounty on the head of every Aborigine. So if you bought a dead Aborigine, you got paid. Just like we have a bounty for deer in the South Island. So it's in that book. It's a shocking story, but that was the difference. But in this book is another person who is close to our people, and his name, of course, is Samuel Marsden. So we'll come back to that. Okay, so what happened then? After Captain Cook was here, now all of this, I hope you're recording this in case something happens to me, and we're going to print this up. In fact, Liz has printed most of it. After this, the first Europeans that started coming here were sealers. The sealers were the ones after the seal, because that was worth a lot of money. So they were the people who brought the turnips and things like that and other European plants into the Bay of Islands. So we always thought, until we did this research, that it was whalers that came first. That was not true. It was sealers. So they started coming here because they heard from the reports that it was seal. There were seals everywhere. So they'd come here and club them, and of course they get the oil. Okay, then we move to the most significant event that affects us as Witahira and Ahitapu. This event is also significant in the history of all of New Zealand. The people that lived here, Ngarero Mate, had a woman who was given to them by the people of Matarawa as part of that tradition that I talked to you about, to keep the peace between the tribes. But that woman complained. In the late 1700s after Cook, she's complaining that she was being ill-treated by Ngāre Raumati here. As a result of that, the people from Matarawa took her to Waimate North, where she was put in the pā, and she remarried a Ngaita Wake man as well. Now that caused an upset within Ngāre Raumati. Now the Pākehās were coming already. They were watching what was happening and how Māori were behaving. So they took this woman back. She was remarried to another Ngāre Raumati, Ngaita Wake man. And because of that, the Ngāre Raumati people, not realising how devastating the Ngaita Wake and Hokianga people can be, they went to the pā at Waimate North. The name of the pā? O Kuratope. Remember that name? O Kuratope at Waimate North. There she was, left with her niece. It's her niece? Yeah. Niece and her grandniece. While her uncle, her cousin, I'll get this right, Liz will follow this up later. Yeah, she'll tell you the actual things. So she was left there while her cousin, now here's the important name that's going to hit you, his name is Te Hōtete. Can you all remember? Somebody, who's the name? Te Hōtete. Can you say that?
Te Hōtete.
Okay, Te Hōtete. So Te Hōtete was away in the Hokianga when the Ngāre Raumati people attacked the pā, o Kuratope pā in now Waimate North. And they killed most of the people there. And most of the people there are Ngaita Wake people. Okay? And Ngāti Rahiri people. So they were very close. And they are connected to Matarawa. So as a result of that, the first most significant event in the history of New Zealand, which was witnessed by Pākehā and written about in every history book that you study today and reference, you will see the story about what happened. So what happened was they raised an army of young men from the bush, from the Hokianga, from Mangakahia, Kaikohe, Matarawa, and they made a sweep. Now we found in our study that when we were talking to various people around the Bay of Islands, that some of them had either a twisted version of that story or didn't get the dates right or the names right, quite right. But what we can tell you is that the reason for the attack was the death of a woman called Whakahoe and her niece called Oporo, and the niece's daughter, Oporo's daughter's name, you see, I'm getting old, aren't I? Te Karetu, okay? But Karehu. Okay, so they killed and ate those three. I don't know what they ate those three in a ceremonial insult to what is now Ngāpuhi. Okay, every history book does make reference to that incident and then the devastating attack on the eastern Bay of Islands. Now it was Te Hōtete that led that attack. In some of the history books we read, because Tamate Wakanene, and when you go to the church in Russell, the biggest monument is to this man, Tamate Wakanene, was a young man, young boy. He joined in that attack. And his brother Patuone. So we're going to come back to those two as well. They are basically from the Hokianga. But they are also famous names in the history of New Zealand. So they came here, was a tradition of the taua, which is the fighting force, to take even 12-year-old boys with them on some of the raids that they had. So the attack started at Tāpeka Point and swept all the way through every pa that they came across. Now Moka told me, Uncle Moka told me that they stopped at Pārua Bay. That's actually not true. That first attack came all the way through here and went south to Taupiri Bay. You know, when you drive the back road, you see the Taupiri Bay. Taupiri Bay is also an important bay for Ngāpuhi and the Wī Te Hira family. So we'll come back to that. Okay? So they came through, they killed everybody that they could find. But some of the people got away and they headed south and they hid in different places. Now the tradition of the Māori at that time was that if there was a significant crime committed by one family, then the whole family had to be destroyed. The crime was that they killed whakapapa. Okay? And whakapapa is the cousin to, what was that one?
No.
Whakapapa is the,
Whakapapa,
her husband is the cousin to Te Hotete.
No, he's an uncle.
Oh, his uncle, sorry. To Te Hotete. So we'll come back to that. Liz will cover that off. So that was a major crime in the eyes of the Ngāpuhi people. And as a result of that, everybody, every family involved in that must die. But of course some of them hid in the bush. Some of them ended up on Great Barrier Island. And that's where the Ngāwaka line comes from. Okay? And then some of them hid under the bush here, but we'll come back to that. So that was a major event in New Zealand history, and that happened in about 1798, 1800, right on that time there. So some of these famous chiefs were there. Okay, or the other woman that was killed, Te Auporo. Te Auporo is another name that's important for us, because she is the mother of 3 important chiefs of Ngāpuhi. All of them are buried at Matarawa. Their names are Te Whararahi, Rewa and Moka. Okay? Te Whararahi, Rewa and Moka. So if we then move forward a little bit more, after this conquest of the southeastern Bay of Islands, you now have Ngāpuhi as the biggest and most powerful tribe in all of New Zealand. But not only that, they are the ones making the most contact with the Pākehā. And one of the strategies they used was they would adopt a Pākehā into their family. Because the Pākehā, even if the Pākehā had escaped from Australia, they knew how to do things with Pākehā tools. And so these families adopted these Pākehā. And so we will come to that, because that is important for us as well. So we then move forward a little bit more, and Hongi Hika is now the son of Te Hotete. Hongi Hika is now becoming prominent and powerful. And the reason for that is he was a very, very intelligent man. We have searched through all of the records of what he got up to, and we've heard all of the people who hate him, and I've seen all of that stuff. But overall, Hongi Hika rose to become the most powerful man ever in the history of New Zealand. One, because he was very clever. Now he and some of the Ngāraumate people who survived, who were related to us, were the first Māoris to learn the language, the English language, and to attend school at Parramatta in Australia. At Parramatta there was a mission school, and Samuel Marsden and his missionaries took some of our ancestors, including Hongi Hika, to Parramatta, where they taught them the language. And there's records of Hongi Hika's writings where he is, you can see the script where he is writing the English alphabet. You can see that in the museum at Russell, everybody. Perfect writer. However, Ruatara who is Hongi Hika's nephew, was the first person to bring the first missionaries here, and that was Samuel Marsden and Kendall, and they settled over the other side of the bay, the north end, near Kerikeri, where there's a cross today. But 1 year after that happened, Ruatara died, Hongi Hika took over and moved the missionaries to Kerikeri. Okay, that's important, because when you go to Kerikeri, you will see the evidence of that. And you will also see Rewa's Pa. Rewa's Pa. So remember that name because it's going to come up in this direct line. So, Hongi Hika, by interacting with the missionaries, was also able to acquire tools and muskets. Not only that, because of his dominance in this area and because of his whakapapa, he was the person who was ultimately taken to meet the King of England and was introduced to the Parliament in England, and we were able today to read the minutes of his introduction to the Parliament. So here's another interesting point. Hongi Hika had relatively fair skin, even though he didn't have Pākehā blood in him, because there's a line of Māori at the time who had relatively fair skin and green eyes and so on. And you will see that later, why that was. But when he was introduced to the Parliament in England, as the King of New Zealand, by the way, some of the parliamentarians are recorded, this guy's not a black man, he's a white man. Now there were less tattoos on his face then. So here he is. The other thing is, he is tall compared to the English, because the Māori were tall. And if you go to Manahiki and the Cook Islands, you will see what Maoris used to look like. They are tall, like this girl here. Okay? They are actually tall, and Hongi Hika was quite fair. Okay, while he's there, he does a deal without British government's approval to get some muskets to Sydney. So he sent them to Sydney because a lot of Māori were working the ports in Sydney by then, and they knew who these muskets were really for. So he was a very cunning guy. He was in England for 9 months. He helped them write the language, the Māori language, because he was hosted at Cambridge University, and that was the first chance that the intellectuals of the world had to write the language down, the Māori language. So it was Hongi Hika that gave them that. Also, he taught them about the Maori religion, and because they questioned him about that. The Maori religion was one of, we believe in life after death, and that we will meet our tupuna, and we must do so in honour. Okay? And that's why if we kill somebody because they were bad, we are doing it on behalf of our tupuna. So he told them that. They wrote all of that down. It's all for you to read. Okay, so he comes back via Sydney. The muskets, there are probably 2,000 of them, end up at Kerikeri. So, I'll just go back a little bit. When he was a teenager, Hongi was saved by his sister, a place called Moronui, which is at Donnelly's Crossing on the way to Dargaville from Matarawa. There was a battle there that took place between Ngāti Whātua, who are by the way related anyway, and Ngāpuhi, and as a result of that battle, Hongi Hika's life was under threat, and his older sister, knowing what his birthright was, ran in front and towards the Ngāti Whātua, and they captured her and burned her alive. And he saw that. So now he's back in New Zealand, he's got muskets. He's got the warriors from Matarawa and the Hokianga. He is the king, literally being called the King of New Zealand, partly because of his mana, his birthright, and also his ability, his intelligence, and so on. So if you want to work out how bright this guy was, you need to read some of these books and I'll show you that one. So we now move forward a little bit more and you end up in the musket wars where there is devastation all across New Zealand because of Hongi Hika being so heavily armed. So he took utu against the people such as the Ngāti Whātua who killed his, I think later on they killed his father as well. So they killed his sister, that's the main thing, thinking that she was Hongi Hika, just to stop that line. Okay, now we're going to go to the whakapapa and tell you why that is important to you. The whakapapa is important because if I just show you this picture first. So this is your hemi whautere. Yeah. Okay, this is your hemi whautere and this is his third wife, Te Ruhi, which means the Lucy. Okay? Now, remember I told you about this tradition of the Ngāpuhi of matching up the important families. So this is an important matchup. Yeah, it's a tomo. You can say it's a tomo. And it actually happened to our father as well. So Kero Tauahika was actually already in a relationship with another woman. But because of this whakapapa and because of who his father was, there was a tomo with te aroha, ahitapu. Okay? So Liz will cover off that. But let's cover this one here. This woman here, Te Ruhi, is the great-granddaughter of the paramount chief of the Hokianga. And his name? Yes, Taunui. So he is senior to Pataone and Wakanene. Okay? He is the senior to those two. So here we have Hemi Whautere, who is a direct line to the woman Whakahoi and her son Ahua. Okay? They are Ngai Taha Wake. They are the important line of Ngai Taha Wake. They are, as Liz will show you with your direct line, they are the great-great-grandparents, great times two, of Hemi Whautere Wikahira. Now he is married to Te Ruhi. So let me show the photo of the grave site of Te Ruhi. So we went to Utukura as part of our research, and this is what we found.
This is her headstone?
This is her headstone, and there is a reason for that. We walked into this marae there. They were having a wānanga. The Anihana family were having a wānanga, explaining to them, their young people like we're doing here. Yeah, this is at Utukura. So they have a beautiful, beautiful marae there. And we walked into the marae, and they stopped their talk, and they said, "Who are you people?" And we said, I told them that I am the son of Kero and the grandson of Te Ruhi. Te Ruhi, I said. Then I sat down. I did this in Maori, actually. It came across quite good. And because I'm among these strangers. And I sat down, and then they said, "It's Te Ruhi, the Lucy." And that's her photo up there. And if you go down the road, you will find a statue to Te Ruhi. And
she backs onto her brother, who is Nika. Yeah, Nika Anderson. Yeah.
Okay, so Te Ruhi Whautere Witehira is on the stone there. And of course, these people were surprised, quite surprised to see us there. There's a photo of our father in that marae. And they hold this woman in high regard because she is the great-granddaughter of the paramount chief of the Hokianga. Okay? That was just Liz.
That's me. And this is his headstone.
and this is the paramount chief's headstone. Now he signed the treaty, of course, and we're going to come to that. So he signed the treaty, but he was one of those dominant chiefs, and they had this crossover. So once Whautere married Te Ruhi, then he is elevated above his brother Pauro, who was older than him. And that is the reason there was that jealousy in Matarawa. The reason there's two marae there is because Hemi Whautere is now married to the great-great-granddaughter of the chief of the Hokianga, and therefore he becomes the chief of Ngāpuhi. And that is why, by the way, Sonny Tau held that position, or is still sitting in that position, because his grandmother is a sister to Hemi Whautere. Okay? So you heard about Sonny Tau and all of the issues about Sonny Tau and the pigeons. Now he shot himself in the foot. That's because his grandmother is a sister to Hemi Whautere. Okay? So I've been to all these Ngāpuhi meetings down, and I've been to the meetings here at Rāwhiti, and I've listened to the talk. But you cannot get away from this talk. These are the people, as you will see with the whakapapa straight lines that we have written for your parents. These straight lines go back to the most important chiefs in all of Ngāpuhi and the most important events. Okay? So let's now go forward. Te Ruhi, the great-granddaughter of the chief of the Hokianga, is now married to Whautere Witihira. Okay? Then, in 1826, this is...
Way back before they were married.
Yes, I know that. I'm going back to where I left off, just to intervene there. So if we go back, the musket wars are coming to the end in 1826. Hongi Hika is becoming so bloodthirsty that he starts to lose the plot a bit, but his three cousins, Te Whararahi, Rewa and Moka, are still there and doing the job for Ngai Tāwake, because they are Ngai Tāwake people, and therefore they had to carry on. Then out here at Rāwhiti, some of the people who survived the raid by Te Hotete were intermarrying with Ngai Tāwake. And so when you look at Hemi Whautere's whakapapa, you can see that he's got blood in those people as well. Hence the reason his brother was born on the island out here. Hence the reason after he married Te Ruhi, he had the mana to go onto the islands and take the bones to Matarawa. Okay? So that puts that part of the picture. But in 1826, Rewa, who was the main general to Hongi Hika, makes a second raid out here. Now his second raid was mainly concentrated on Pāro Bay, which basically wiped out Ngāreroumate. So the people that lived here called Ngāreroumate lost Pāro Bay that time. Hongi Hika didn't want them to lose that, but his cousin Rewa and Moka, they decided, no, we'll clean them out. And just not long after that, the tribe known as Ngāreroumate is no more heard of in the Bay of Islands. Okay? Mm-hmm. Then they come through here, and then he appoints his son, his daughter, his son, Kere Monganui. He appoints, this is Rewa, he appoints his son Kere Monganui to administer all the lands here, and he calls these people Patu Keha after the death of his mother at Waimate North. Okay? That's where that all comes from. Patu Keha, his son Kere Monganui, is the important name now for you to think about, because he is the guy that says you can go there, you can go there, and you can go there. So his older brother, Te Whararahi, takes Pāro Bay. his younger brother, Moka, another warrior, takes, what's this? Oma Kiwi, Tangata Pui, and that area. This area here, Ahitapu, the Ahitapu family. They are related to Moka. Then Liz will come back and show you where our mother comes through there. There was another son, which he will talk about, and that is a brother of Kere Monganu. And you will see his role in our family here and our connection with Hemi Fautere as well as Matarawa. Okay? So, he basically, where the cemetery is up there where our mother is buried, it was Kere Monganui, the son of Rewa, who actually established that as the shared cemetery between those from Hawaii, and he put those Hawaii people there, and those from over here. So you'll find that in the whakapapa as well. So he, towards the end of the 1800s, or towards the end of his life, became quite controversial. There was a lot of arguing, just as there is today, about why he put certain people certain places. Okay. Let's now go forward to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, but just before that, and Liz will probably talk about this more, there was a couple of interactions. Hungi Hika died in 1828 because he had a bullet wound that went right through his chest, and he survived for 18 months after that, which was fortunate because if he had died straight away, there would have been a vacuum and a war between all the hapu of Ngāpuhi, and maybe the Tainui people would have come up here and wiped us out. After the raid on the Waikato though, and I have to touch on this because I said that at the cemetery, Rewa offered his daughter, Mātiri Topa, his toha, as a peace offering to Tainui, to Te Wherowhero. So she was married off to Kati, Te Wherowhero's brother. If you know anything about the Waikato, Te Wherowhero is a very famous name. He's the chief. And Hungi Hika, when he attacked the Waikato at Mātakitaki Pā near Purongia, where they had a big wipeout, Ngāpuhi just slaughtered a whole lot of Tainui there. But they saved the life of Te Wherowhero, who was the chief of Tainui. And later on, after that attack, Rewa offered his daughter in marriage to Tainui. Okay, so that guy's name, he's the brother of Te Wherowhero with Kati. They had a daughter who became the princess of all Tainui. She was famous. And she is, of course, the bloodline to our family because she is the daughter of Rewa. Okay? So they own the land that the marae is on, and that land above there where the... What's that family on the hill? No? No. This side. Just above the school, on that peninsula, there's a house up there. Tenana. Tenanas. Oh, is that Refa as well?
Yeah.
Refa?
Yeah.
Or Refa?
Refa.
Okay.
Refa's over here. And they all interconnected.
Yeah, so in Fautere's whakapapa, you will see that name come through as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but that is the connection between Tainui and us. And I checked that with Tom Broa and Tainui the other day. We had a good meeting, and he said, yes, that is it. That is the connection, is at Te Rāwhiti, and it is a well-known connection in all of Tainui. Okay? Tom Broa was also aware of the connection of the Wī Te Hira, and this is another thing you need to know. It's spelled Wī Te Hira, not Wī Te Hira. That came later on when they were filling out family benefit applications. It was easier to spell it as one word.
Oh, so
Okay.
it's 3 words.
That's right, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Wī means, hey, surprise. Te Ta Hira means a special, he was fair when he was born. So the aunties went, oh, Wī Te Hira. Okay, that's what they came from. Now you may need to, yeah. So you may also need to know that, and the first person that told me that was actually Tom Roth from Tainu. He says, oh, that word, we te hira, is 3 separate words. And that's what it actually means. Because remember that hongi hika had fair skin, and that's why.
And we also found that on the death certificate of Meta, who Hammy had it in a book, and the death certificate was verified by Hammy Witehira, his grandfather, but his parents' names were spelled Witehira on the death certificate.
And also in all the Maori Land Court records going up to about 1915, it's even Hemi Fautere is called Witehira. Okay? So that's important. That our mother told us a different story about that name, but we found out the truth about it is one of the Tau family told us that we te whakahira is what he said. But it's actually we in the Maori Land Court, it's we te hira, and that's starting way back in the 1870s they start using that. Okay? Akanihi we te hira is the way they named. Even Hemi Fautere was named we te hira until later on. Anything else I need to cover on that? Okay, do you want to go over the mash? Yeah, I think I can finish here, but you can ask me some questions. So what we will do is we will put this stuff into a book. But I have to summarize. The relationship between the people at Hawaii and the people here has been strained as a result of bad interpretation. The people of Hawaii, who, like the Refas, Tananas and all of those people, have Ngai Tā Wake blood in them, otherwise they won't be here. When I sat down and talked directly to Matu Clinton, he admitted to me that that was true. Because what we find with people is by twisting things around, they like to get an advantage if they want to hear their own line. And then some people will say, well, the Witehiras, you don't belong in Rafiti. Of all of the families, when you look at the history of all of the families that are here in Rafiti, we are the most significant family because of our direct relationship to Te Whararahi, Moka, Rewa, Whakahoe, Hongi Hika, both on our father's side and on our mother's side. Okay? So her land holding in Te Rāwhiti is significant because she was brought up by her great-grandparents because her grandparents had died. Her mother had died. And had remarried. No, but did die as well. And therefore she was left with the inheritance of her grandfather, and there was no other issue. That made a lot of people around here jealous, but she was pretty when she was young, and therefore her great-grandparents seemed to have found it an honour to be looking after her here in Te Rāwhiti. And she excelled in school. She was good at everything. She attended the school here. And Liz will talk to you a little bit about that stuff as well. Okay.
Oh, good.
Oh,
All right, so
okay.
we've put together the direct line, and I'll hand some out. We've done some copies here. If anybody wants to grab it, yeah, you can keep them. We just didn't have lots of.
Now remember, this is a direct line, so there's a lot of other lines that come into these people. Yep.
Some over there. Share.
Share those.
Got one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Some over there.
They're just having a nice moi. Do you want to? I need one.
I got one, Dad.
I need one just to refer to.
What about Andre over there?
So when you have a look under Tā Wake Haunga and Wehere at the top there, you go down that left line Down here you see Marihu and Harinui. Then you see Whitirua and Whakapapa. Now, Whitirua, so the dark, the names in bold are the direct line, and the unbold are the married into. See, so Peter's the direct line, I'm the married into. All right?
What?
So
The dark one
the
is-
bold ones are the direct line. All right? The unbold are the ones who've married into. So you see that Whakahui is the wife of Whitirua. She's not the direct line here.
However, she is from Matara.
She is Ngāi Tawa. But
And
I
is it-
haven't got her separate line. So
Is it the males on top and the females under bottom?
generally,
That's
yes. What I've tried to do is put the males on top and the females under, just to make it so easy. All right. So you have a look there, and you can see that Whakahui comes, Whitirua and Whakahui come down one
Yeah,
line.
they have a son there. What's his name?
Yeah, I'll get to that. And Te Hotete comes down the other line there. You got that? No, oh yeah. And then over to the left here is Te Hotete's sister, Te Aoporo, and her sons
Te Aoporo is the one who was killed.
yeah.
At,
at the, yeah, so Whakahui and Te Aoporo were killed, and her daughter Te Karuhu. See her name there?
Yeah, next to
Where?
Whaderahi.
Under,
Yeah, Whararahi,
next to
yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
then you've got Whararahi,
Whararahi is the
oldest.
older brother of those three brothers.
then you've got
Oh, yeah.
Te Karuhu, who's got no issue because she was killed. Then you've got Rewa and you've got Moka. See those ones there?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look down under Rewa's line, you can see that he has got Te Warana Manu. And he marries Te Himwata. Then we've got
That's where Himwa's name comes from.
then we've got their son is Hone Heke Warana, and he marries Te Haerengaroa, and they have a daughter, Kei Hone Heke Warana. And she has a son, Riwhi Reweri Ahitapu, who has a daughter, Hana Riwhi Ahitapu, who has a daughter, Te Aroha Ahitapu. Alright? So then you look down Moka's line. Moka has a son, Te Ahitapu Moka, who has a son, Reweri Tauri Ahitapu. He and Kay marry. So Reweri is from the Moka line, Kay
Kay.
is from Rewa's line.
Right, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Like English royalty used to do.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the way, that tradition I told you, they made sure that these people stuck
stayed
together.
Yeah, so what we generally found is that people, Māori whānau, married not because they loved each other necessarily, but because of strategic alliances, strengthening your family, bringing into your family somebody who can benefit your line. So obviously divorce wasn't around back then. So that was all really interesting that we had that direct through Rewa and Moka.
Took a while to get that all together, because the other thing that we found was sometimes people misspelt words
Yeah.
and put stuff in the whakapapa, the genie and all of that stuff, but it was only as a result of reading lots of books
Yeah.
and records that we actually found the actual spelling was
We
this
were
one.
given some minutes from early Māori land court meetings back in the early 1900s, which gave us a fair bit of information, particularly about Kere Maunganui and Te Warana. There's also a website called Papers Past that is really interesting. Very, very interesting. So some of the things that I want to tell you about is really, I have moved back up here and I have become a little bit immersed in the family history, and it has been really exciting and interesting. And I want to share with you some of the interesting things that we have found, and hopefully enthuse you to get and learn a little bit more about some of these ancestors, because their lives were just so interesting, and some of the things that they did that were left for us. But just coming back across to, so we've got that line over there, we've got Te Hotete and Hongi Heka running down here, and then you see Hongi Heka is the son of Te Hotete, and he has a son called Hare Hongi Heka, and he has a daughter who is Waihoria Hare Hongi. Now if you move right over to this side of the page, there is Waihoria Hare Hongi. She is married to Matutaira Rewharewha. Now interestingly, reading through the books, you find that Te Hotete and Rewharewha fought each other. Not particularly this Rewharewha, but the next few generations up. So you can see that tomo between is another one of those alliances, a settlement of past grievances from a few generations before. You know, settlements didn't always happen straight away. It was a few generations later where people were brought together to bring peace, to those families.
Just interrupt her, just bring in something important here. So if I just bring in the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, a lot of people, when we did the research on, because I was always familiar with Claudia Orange's book on the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, but there was literally 8 chiefs who actually made the call. And if I can put it this way, if these 8 chiefs had not agreed to sign or go with the British, if any other hapu decided to do it themselves, that hapu would have been killed off. It wouldn't have been allowed. Now the 8 chiefs that were there, they were related to each other and also to us, were the ones who made the call, except for one of them, and I'll explain that to you. The 8 chiefs were Patuone, Tamate Wakanene, Thomas Wakanene. Okay, now those two had become very friendly with the British missionaries. But importantly, their sister was married to Te Wharerahi, and he was there as well. And so was Rewa, and so was Moka. And importantly, Kone Heke was there, but he was married to Hongi Heka's daughter, who is the niece of these 3 brothers, our relations from Matarawa. Okay? So there was Te Kemara, who was the local chief at Waitangi, but he was junior to these ones. So after all of the talking, out of those chiefs, the only one that didn't sign was Moka. So Moka, obviously though, went along with his older brother. So the next most significant, and still today the most significant event in the history of New Zealand, is the signing of the treaty between the Māori and the British. And the people who made the call are our direct descendants. And they're there on that. Okay? Because Patuone and his brother are brothers-in-law to Te Wharerahi. Okay? The senior of those 3 brothers. But they are also from cousins to Te Taunui, Te Ruhi's family. So you can see why that was important for our family. Okay.
Alright, so to get back to this one, so you can see those links. So the bloodline runs through Te Hotete, through Waihoria Hare Hongi, and also through this line here. Okay? So that's really important to follow through. So just also going over to this side, to the Taunui side. Te Taunui was the chief of the Te Popoto hapu over in the Hokianga. But some of the interesting things that I have found in reading about these people. So we have had, you can see we've got a whole bunch of books over here.
Okay.
And we've read all sorts of things and talked to lots of people, and it's been really interesting. But so Te Taunui, he was the younger brother of the chief Muriwai. And Muriwai, when he died in 1828, 900 fighting men turned up at his tangi. So he was a really important person, Muriwai, over in the Hokianga. So Te Taunui is his younger brother and takes over from Muriwai. Taunui first met Samuel Marsden in 1915 and travelled back to Sydney with him in 1816. He took on the name Makoare after Governor Macquarie in Sydney. So that's where he took on that name. The missionary Kendall, when he went to England in 1820 with Honge Hika, he was approached by a guy whose name was the Baron Charles de Thierry. I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy. He was a little bit of a delusional fellow who he had left France after the Napoleonic Wars and the beheading of
That's
all
the
people
revolution,
there.
the French
The French
Revolution.
Revolution, and moved to England. He decided that his role in life was to save
France.
natives in the South Pacific. Anyway, he raised a whole pile of money and ended up in Tahiti and pronounced himself the king of Nikuhiva in the Marquesas Islands, actually. And he established a little sort of colony there, and he wanted to do the same
That's where
thing.
Bora Bora is, by the way. Yeah.
Wanted to do the same thing in New Zealand. So when the missionary Kendall was in England with Honge Hika in 1820, de Thierry approached Kendall, gave him money, and asked him to buy land back here in New Zealand. He wanted 40,000 acres. So he gives Kendall about $3,000 apparently.
It's like $1 million today.
Kendall gets back to New Zealand and approaches Te Taunui and asks if he can, buy some land. So he actually just gives him some axes. Taunui doesn't see this as a purchase of land, and de Thierry doesn't come to New Zealand until about 15 years later. Meanwhile, he is in Nukuhiva, and this guy, de Thierry, is writing letters back and forwards to Busby, who is by this time
The guy
in the
who
30s,
drafted the treaty.
becomes the governor, So Busby starts to become quite concerned in the late 20s and the early 30s that the French are going to come in and come in under the British and take control of New Zealand. So he talks the chiefs into writing a letter to King William in 1831.
1831.
Taunui is one of the signatories. There's only 13 signatories, with Patuane, Nene and Whararahi.
Te Whararahi and that one, yeah.
Then in 1835, Busby is becoming more concerned because actually de Thierry is on his way here. And so he gets them to sign this Declaration of Independence, which is a whole nother story.
So that's Te Whararahi, and that's a very interesting legal challenge that New Zealand's facing, because his signature on the English version of it is the first signature on the Declaration of Independence. Te Whararahi is there, and the argument now is, did the Māori on the signing of the treaty, did they cede sovereignty to the British? Why would they, if they had 10 times more people here and they had already written a Declaration of Independence? And that's that flag you see with the red cross and the stars.
But the interesting story about de Thierry is he arrives in New Zealand. Patuane and Nene and Taunui say to him, well, actually you don't have 40,000 acres, but we will let you stay on this bit of land over here. So they allow him to stay, and
This
he
is in the Hokianga.
sets up his little colony in the Hokianga. And then during the Northern Wars, when Honeheke was chopping down the flagpole in 1844 and 1845, etc., Patuane and Nene say to de Thierry, it's not safe enough for you to stay here, you really should leave. So he leaves and moves to Auckland. Taunui moves into de Thierry's house and gets his land back, which is quite cool, actually. Yeah, so I thought that was quite a fun story. Now, Taunui also was the first person in New Zealand, he and Patuane were the first ones to build a European-style ship, and they called it the Sir George Murray. Now this is in 1830 when they build the ship. Taunui owned acres and acres and acres of land
This is
over
where
in
he
the
brings in
Hokianga,
Anderson, right?
and he's got all this kauri, and he's got Pākehā in there wanting to buy the
Anderson.
kauri because they're making spars for ships out of the kauri because it's such a strong timber. So he and Patuane and some of the people that they had there built this ship, sailed it across to Australia with supplies from New Zealand, wanting to sell their supplies. The ship gets impounded at Sydney because it does not have a flag.
It's not registered.
It doesn't comply with international shipping regulations and so forth. So it's impounded. Taunui loses his ship, and a guy named Macdonnell eventually buys it. Macdonnell brings it back to New Zealand. But
that ship ended up in Singapore.
Eventually. At about that time, my guess is that Taunui meets up with this person named John Havelock Anderson, who's a Scotsman. Now, John Havelock Anderson, the story goes, his father William was a convict from Scotland, taken to Australia, and John Havelock Anderson is born in Parramatta, which interestingly is where I was born, and so I found this all really interesting, this connection to Parramatta. But I don't have any records of John Havelock Anderson coming back at that time, but I'm putting sort of bits and pieces together, because by 1834 John Havelock Anderson is living in the Hokianga. Taunui has sold him 1,000 acres of land and given him his daughter.
Yeah, and gave him a daughter.
And his daughter's name is Te Ruhi as well, Te Ruhi the first. So John and Te Ruhi have 3 children, and their son Hone Manoto Anehana has a daughter who is Te Ruhi, who marries Henry Whakapapa. So we don't just have Robert Bruce in our line as a Scotsman, we have John Havelock Anderson as well as a Scotsman. So he stays in the Hokianga, and he becomes a shipbuilder and carpenter and so forth. So yeah, he's a really interesting person. So going back across to Whakahui here, obviously she is the person, we've got it all clear, she is the person who was killed in the turnip patch with Te Auporo. So you can see her directly in the line here as well. So her name isn't just part of the sort of wider history, it's quite pivotal in the family history as well, that she was there. Te Hotete, of course, he is, Peter covered off on him. Hongi Hika is the third son of Te Hotete. He was born in 1772, Hongi Hika.
So that's 3 years after Cook.
Came here. Yeah, that's right. And it's about the same time as the sacking of the Boyd, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's another story, but you can read that.
Which is a really interesting story.
That's mainly Ngāre Raumati.
Yeah. So Peter's covered off on Hongi Hika, how he went to England and so forth and met the king. But Te Whararahi, he was the older son of Te Auporo, and Te Maio, he married Tari, who is the sister of Patuane and Wakanene. He signed the letter, the 1831 letter to the king, the 1835 declaration and the treaty. Now he was he's the one, Te Whararahi, who basically supported the British coming in here.
Yeah, more than anybody else. Yeah.
Because of his, I think, close involvement with Patuane and Tamati Wakanene, who were very involved with Taunui over in the Hokianga. But Rewa is the interesting one. So I've got a long bit on Rewa. Rewa, I've read in a book called Te Kerikeri, which you might want to read, seeing as you're living there. There's a book called Te Kerikeri by Judith Binney, and
go and visit his pa, it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. She quoted from that book, it says, Rewa was a major war leader. He was Hongi Hika's closest associate, though subordinate to him, not through rank, but because Hongi's mana was greater and because Hongi was older. When Hongi shifted to Whangaroa in 1826 and then died of a war wound in 1828, Rewa was recognised as one of the most powerful chiefs of the Northern Alliance in the Bay of Islands. Rewa took over from Hongi as protector of the Anglican mission. And in a separate paper from Victoria University, the Reverend J.D. Lang, who actually met Rewa, described him and what he looked like. And he described him as, quote, "He is as fine a looking man as I have ever seen. Tall, muscular, athletic, with an expression of kindness on his open countenance," sort of like Uncle Hemi over here. Yeah. he's pointing to himself. Yeah. Tall, handsomest man that he's ever seen. Tall, muscular, athletic.
Wait. Tall tick.
Muscular? You're muscular? Athletic?
Well, we have some pictures of Hemi when he was
You should have
there.
seen him under that trailer. You see
Yeah, I
those
reckon.
pretty athletic, pushing it up like this.
Yeah. And but he says, notwithstanding the tattooing, which has disfigured his face, which was quite interesting. So underneath all that, but he does go on to say his daughter is one of the handsomest native women I have seen.
Yeah, one of his
Yes.
daughters is the
I'm
nun.
going to tell you
Yeah,
about the
right,
daughters. So Rewa married Te Koki, and they had at least 5 children that we can find out about. Their Matiri Toha, who Peter talked about, Te Para, who became a nun, and did a lot of the botanical work for the French.
She lived here for a while.
Kere Maunganui, who we have the land minutes about, who distributed the land, Moiwaka and Warana. So Moiwaka is another
Warana
interesting one.
Manu is his name.
Yeah, so Warana Manu. So Moiwaka was, have you heard of the Girls' War in Russell? No, you've never heard of the Girls' War. Okay. So Moiwaka is Rewa's daughter, right? They are living over there at
Kororareka.
Kororareka back in 1830. Moiwaka is
Rewa, by the way,
cohabiting.
Rewa booted the people. Yeah, no, that's all right. Rewa, by the way, booted the people who were living there at the time out. He put them in kawakawa.
That's the end of my story. Okay, so
Yeah, all right.
so she was cohabiting with an English captain whose name was William Brynd. But William Brynd was a bit of a sort of fancy man and had a few girlfriends.
Oh,
So-
womanizer.
A bit of a womanizer. So the tribe that were living there were Ngāti Manu, and a Ngāti Manu woman and Moiwaka had a disagreement on the beach over Captain Brynd. And that exploded into a battle where both
Different
you know,
hapu.
their uncles came and
So
you
they
know
had a
support.
bit of a-
So Rewa comes and
spotlight.
supports his daughter, and the Ngāti Manu woman, her uncles and so forth come and support him. Anyway, about 100 people on each side were killed in the battle.
Whoa!
So it was called the Girls' War, and there is record of it in the Russell Museum, and it's it's quite a sort of a turning point in history because
Girls
as a
scratching
result of
each
that,
other.
yeah,
He is not worth
Pulling
it,
hair.
girls.
he's
Yeah,
not
so-
worth it. He's a womanizer. So anyway, Ngāti Manu are then banished from Kororareka,
By Rewa.
and Rewa takes over. Rewa and Titure take over. So this is his daughter. So really interesting. You hear these stories
David
about
story.
these different names, but actually they are directly related to you. So yeah. All right. So then Moka, and we've gone through who his 3 sons are. But interestingly, Te Ahitapu Moka, in papers past, and I've got a printout of the paper in 1876. There's a meeting out here, and the Marquis of Normanby is the governor at the time, and various people are there, and they are. I want to read you the article because it actually, and I know we're sort of doing a lot of talking, but you'll find this one really interesting, and it's the very last one. But this is about. Can I have the pink?
Yeah, I saw the pink folder, but I
Give me the
can't see
pink
it in
folder.
there.
Oh, okay, I'll get it. Because it actually gives you an understanding of what people were being treated like. And to be honest, I read this article and I was embarrassed. And to be really honest, as part of all this research, I have come to understand how Uncle Blandy feels, and how he has that passion and that disregard for the colonisers. And I have come to gain that as well. So I'll read you this little article. It's on Friday, May 19th, 1876. The visit of the Marquis of Normanby to the Bay of Islands and the Māori inhabitants thereof was distinguished by not a few interesting incidents. Apparently the whole business of the reception had been carefully rehearsed under the direction of Sir Donald Maclean and his satellites, so that the actual performance went off capitally. All the old chiefs were trotted out, and, quote, "Welcome, O Governor, may you live forever. Come, O Governor, and see your children who have no other parent than you. Come to us because we are orphans," were the expressions heard from every lip. I know. Wait, it gets worse. Then the governor did the paternal business and gave his children a large amount of good advice, telling them to educate the young Māori, who in that case would by and by rival the Europeans. One personage named Marsh Brown, who is Maihi Pareone, was very enthusiastic in welcoming the governor, but at the same time contrived to buttonhole him and commence a long narrative of his grievances in connection with a lawsuit in the Supreme Court. For this he was snubbed by Sir Donald Maclean, and having subsided, sought consolation by rubbing noses with Hori Tupaia. Next, the aged Hohaia Waikato was led forward and addressed His Excellency thus. And anyway, they go through, because Waikato had been to meet the king and so forth, they go through what they discussed. We don't need to read it. And then it says, the natives had a talk with His Excellency about their wants, and it is astonishing how numerous these were, and how great was their importunity. Most of them longed for powder, shot, and percussion cap in any quantity. Te Ahitapu wanted a schoolhouse built. Te Monganui implored that he should be given a license for a gun to shoot whales. This is Kere Monganui. Then the old man, who had seen the Prince Regent, the Duchess of Kent and the Duke of Wellington, wanted a boat to be given to himself and another aged friend. Then there's another who lived in the house where the Treaty of Waitangi was signed, and he wanted that to be rebuilt. Anyway, it said, it is not on record what answer the governor made to this demand, but all the suitors were pacified with promises by Sir Donald Maclean, who assured them that their request should be duly taken into consideration, and His Excellency at length was suffered to depart. The whole of these proceedings afford a pretty clear indication of what the policy is which the government adopts towards the native race. Sir Donald Maclean treats them as if they were spoiled children who must be petted, humoured, coaxed and bribed into good behaviour. He claims great credit for having maintained peace in the colony by means of that policy, but the claim is ill-founded. Sir Donald Maclean's policy was successful because it came into operation after the natives had been soundly beaten and cowed into submission. They kept the peace because they were exhausted and sick of fighting, and we believe they would have done so without the coaxing and bribery being employed at all. The time will soon come when the present method of treating the natives must be altered. They should be treated with kindness, firmness and justice, but there is no reason why they should be made to feel that we are willing to show them exceptional favour if they will only remain quiet. That is the very way to cause them to be unreasonable and importunate in their demands. Isn't that amazing?
So it was
That's a
Ahitapu who
newspaper
got the
article.
school in the end.
Yeah.
What did he do? He stopped the ship from
He
taking.
stopped the barge. Apparently the story goes that the
Well,
materials
it's not,
for the
it's
ship
a true story.
were sent out here on a barge. It was supposed to be built at Hawaii Bay, but there was
They were
disagreement between
arguing
them.
over at Hawaii, as they do.
The barge was leaving. Rewari Ahitapu, his Moka Ahitapu's son, rowed out to the barge and said, bring it back, it can be built on my land.
And that's why it's here.
That's why it's down here.
Okay?
Yeah.
So
So
soon,
lots of history. Yeah.
while Liz is looking up the story behind this famous photo at
if you want
Matarawa,
to hear it.
I found
Anyway.
this in Pitas past. When Hemi Fote was 18 years old, he represented Kaikohe rugby team in the Bay of Islands competition. So this is all in Māori, but here's the list of the people who were in the Bay of Islands rugby team. So Hemi Fote would have been 18 at the time.
He was married then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hori Rakete Mokara Mohi Rongo Reihana. That's very important. Hori Puriri Hoera Parahi Hori Kira Paoro Witahira, older brother. M Hone Tawa Ngā Wati Reihana, not a Reihana there. Matu Era Miha Pautere Witahira. So he's in the backs. Ui Rakete Rata Ngā Koti Kiro Kari He. Have you lost it?
Wait, is it any of these papers over here?
Oh yeah, there it is. And we kaihe. So there they are. The Waikato, the Kaikohe represented rugby team and Hemi Potere. So the reason I'm showing you that is because there's this new online site now called Papers Past.
So interesting.
It
Look
is
it up.
really interesting. It goes
You can
right
just
back to the
type in a
medieval.
name and it'll come up with a whole list of all the newspapers that that person's name has been in. So that's where I found the story about Ahitapu. I just typed it in and it came up with that story about Ahitapu meeting the Marquis of Normanby and requesting
So
the
we're
story.
at an advantage today because
Huge advantage.
our parents didn't have the internet where all of these records are now accessible. But you have to do more than that. You do have to go to the various marae when you can and interact, just as we went to Utukura and we met those people there and they were stunned.
Oh, fabulous.
And they were awesome people. And they welcomed us as part of their family. And hello, on the wall there's a picture of our father and our grandmother. And then they say, and there's a statue to your grandmother. She's famous to us. Okay? So here.
So then there's these photos of Hemi Fautere when he visited Salt Lake. If anybody wants to see them, I did put them on. I put them onto the whānau Facebook page with the story behind it.
And so this is the last thing we want to read to you. The story behind this photo. This
Does
is that
anybody know it?
famous photo
Aye.
at Matarawa. Okay? So Liz and I sat with Tauko,
Tauko.
and Tauko explained us the story behind this photo. So Liz has written that up as a story that the younger, your grandchildren, can read when they see this photo, because that marae, which is called Ngai Tāwake, has been done up. Okay, so there'll be a new building there. This is the story behind the photo.
So do you want me to read the story?
Yes.
It's very short. That's not.
Are
That's
you going
very
to put all
small
of these?
writing, so
Very short, very
Are you going
short.
to put all these stories in the?
Yeah.
Well, what I want to do is to pull together all of these stories and put them into a book or
it's
something
hard
like
because
that.
it'll be hard to pick which story
Yeah.
and
No,
how what
just
order.
choose all of them.
Yeah.
Okay,
In an
here we go.
encyclopedia.
Here we go. Here's the story behind this photo.
Only those stories. Okay.
This actually happened because I read it in Reader's Digest when I was on my mission. Okay.
Deep in Mongero Mountain lay caves with treasures of the past. The mountain holds secrets only those brave enough may find. Stories of bodies secreted in the caves abounded for years. In the valley below, boys dared each other to venture high into Mongero to search the caves and uncover its secrets. Often they climbed and searched, cajoling each other to go further and deeper. The thrill of finding treasure, or even better, a body, drove them to compete with each other. They formed a pact never to tell of their secret missions to Mongero, the sacred mountain of their fathers. All cousins, all living in Matarawa Valley. Some were still at primary school, some older, working the farms and fields.
Some with the name Joyce.
Each cousin had his reasons for climbing Mongero. Each harboured silent fears, but all had made a pact from which they could not retreat. In the spring of 1942, the boys set out again to scale Mongero. They had no boots or ropes or packs. In bare feet they scaled the rocky cliff faces, hauling each other upwards towards the summit. One by one they climbed higher and higher, crawling deeper and deeper into each darkened cave. With only candles to light their way, they trod carefully, stumbling over old logs and bottles left by earlier adventurers. Late afternoon clouds began to shadow Mongero. Just one more cave, they decided. Deep within they saw a shape, a person sitting upright. Silence fell. Some pulled back, while others moved closer, trying to show their bravery. Poking at the body, an arm fell to the ground. They gasped and waited. They had disturbed a tapu place. The oldest picked up the arm and told the boys to run, retreating as fast as they could, the arm wrapped in a shirt. They scoured down Mongero as dusk settled on the valley. It was not long until excitement overtook them and the arm was taken to school to taunt younger ones. The teacher called in the boys' parents and a hui was held to decide what to do. To show respect to the body, Koro Paora and Koro Hemi decided that a tangi should be held and the old lady's bones buried. Because these brothers each had their own marae, it was decided that the tangi would be held at Koro Paora's marae of Te Huehe and the bones buried at Koro Hemi's whānau cemetery of Paripari. The grave was marked with the name Kino, as some of the old people had remembered the woman's name was Kokino. At the end of the tangi, the old men gathered together at Te Huehue Marae for a photo. The photo still hangs at both Ngai Tāwake and Te Huehue Marae.
Is that
That
the
is
story you told us?
amazing. Yeah, that's
the
the
story.
yeah, but this is behind the photo. So
This
we've
is
always
behind the
wondered
photo.
what
What was
happened.
Yeah.
Well, it was
Why?
Tauko who told us. He was a 7-year-old boy at school when those older boys
Well,
bought
bring
the
that
ham,
arm.
and he was terrified. So he's the one who told us. So I wrote the story around.
Yeah, so
that
it's the
just to
Joyce. It was one of the Joyces come from Utukura. There's Brian Joyce, and they're from Papakura. They're our relations, and they're intermarried with the Witahira, and they were mischievous. That
No
family.
wonder the header would need to always say their voices, though, even though they were married into them.
Probably brings up a point. There's a marking there of kino,
Simple-minded.
Yes.
but it's only on a piece of wood.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
It maybe we need to go and make up more
A
permanent.
proper thing.
Yeah, because the other important thing,
Yeah. And
True
I
that.
thought too that we need to write up something about the photo and put it by the photo.
yeah, the
So
other
that people
important
can-
thing about that is that Hongi Heka's daughter, the one Hariata that married Hone Heke, is supposed to be buried in one of those caves. Mongero. Okay? So we're just trying to track that. There's a woman historian that lives at Harovea Pākehā woman who says that she's found evidence that Hariata is one of the bodies in those caves.
Well, you know the tradition of the hahunga, don't you? The tradition of the hahunga was that a year after somebody died, you know, their body was left to decay, but then about a year after, the chiefs would go and bring the body and the bones, and they would scrub the bones clean and paint them with red ochre, and then they would hide those bones in a secret vault only known to a few people. So it
Although
wasn't.
Yeah, that tradition didn't apply in the Ngāi Tāwake practiced a mummification, where they wrapped the bodies.
Well, it was Hongi Heka. They did that to him.
Yeah.
There's records of it in the books. So,
Okay.
so as you can see, we've been having great fun.
So Mongero is that
And it is
cliff
really
that you're
interesting
driving
a
into
little trip
Matara.
because this sounds fun.
I know. So we've got a whole pile of books, you know, that we've sort of collected over the time. We don't want
got a
them to
lot
go anywhere. But if when you're up here, you want to come and have a bit of a read, come and we'll let
Yeah,
you
and
read
see
them.
what Hemi's got there.
Hemi's
You've got it.
scroll.
It's behind you.
It's right here behind you. This is the scroll. Do you want to explain it, Hemi?
No, it doesn't matter. So this is my hofa. My hofa is she a wehungi? She was brought up by the wehungi.
It's very long.
It is
Yeah,
very, very
it's too
long.
long.
It goes right down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would go like from there all
So
the way to that
this,
step.
I typed all of this up and I put it on our Facebook page as a PDF. So you can check the names on that there are checked against this.
So
Okay.
and finally, you need to know that if anybody ever again asks you why or how come you're in Te Rāwhiti, you can say, because my tupuna on my grandmother's side and my tupuna on my grandfather's side, on my father's side, they are from here. Okay?
Now you can show them.
So
Rewa,
now you can
moka, hongi
This
hika.
used to be up in the marae. A lot of
Rewharewha.
this was at Rāwhiti marae, but some of those people that wanted to reinterpret, they pulled it all down. When Mum was alive, the story of the utu was up on the wall.
And this
It's
is kept
also
at Uncle
to-
Hemi's place. Yeah.
Also, there is a cave. Well, let's get Julie and I been there. Dad took us up just up from Paripari, where there's some bones in there. And before, it was all tapu up there, and Papa lifted all the tapu from there, so nobody was allowed to go there. But see, we've been up there. It's a little bit walk up the hill to get to it, but we've been there a couple of times, Julie and I, because Dad showed us. The history of how those bones got there, Dad says during the wars they used to shoot them down into that, it's in
Cavity,
a cavity of a rock. And you know, it's good to know that history, but I don't know who got all that history.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of bodies, by the way. There's a lot of people killed. At Tangatapu, you know where the walk to the whale station is?
Oh yeah.
It's Tauhahika, one of our tupuna, led that inland raid and killed hundreds of people there. So if you keep digging, you'll find bones. If you go out to the island here, I found a skull in the water there. It was real easy because a lot of people killed in this utu that came from Matarawa. Okay? So there's bones everywhere.
Wow.
So we hope you found that not too boring.
O mā kiwi, there's still falling out.
Yeah.